In this corner, the new heroic Magneto from the Marvel Legends X-Men 97 Series 2, and in this corner, the villainous Magneto of X-Men 97 Series 1. Which side of the Master of Magnetism will prevail? It's too early to say for the show, but in terms of action figures, place your bets and stick around. It's time for another Versus. Starting off with the packaging, and both Magnetos come on matching X-Men 97 blister cards, right down to being in the exact same pose. Flipping the cards around and they're in the same pose also, but in reverse, and honestly I find that fascinating. Picture, if you will, that classic intro shot of the X-Men and the Brotherhood of Mutants charging at each other. Side by side, and this image kind of evokes Magneto's battle within himself to be good. Also, if you're wondering, the reason why the heroes are always seen coming from this angle is because we read left to right, so our brain sees that as charging forward, so then right to left feels kind of subversive or retreating. I really like these cards and the subtle differences that make each one unique, and for packaging, this round is a draw. Moving on to presentation, and both figures stand at 6.5 inches. The hero version shares a torso with Sunfire. Keep that in the back of your mind because it's going to be important in the next category, but he does have updated pinless arms and legs. The villain version, however, is a new sculpt. The arms are based on the sculpt of the Family Matters 3-pack, but have been updated to be pinless, similar to 97 Wolverine, and a bit of the trunks are on the upper leg. Personally, I'm not a fan of that because it looks really wonky when you try to use the leg articulation. And speaking of the legs, those are based on the Family Matters 3-pack as well, but again, it's now pinless, and they also got rid of the boot cut. One of the best parts, however, is the cape. Previous Magnetos had the cape and collar as a separate piece, so it was constantly flopping around. This one still has a peg hole in the back, but the collar has been inlaid into the upper torso, so it's nice and snug. Another great feature is the head. The animated series helmet has that weird tuning fork scarab beetle whatever on the forehead, and some nice metallic purple for the trim. They also went in and added a shadowing effect to underneath the helmet, which at first I didn't like the idea of, but seeing it in hand I really dig it. It really makes the eyes and the eyebrows pop, and in general you can see what a good job they did painting underneath. One thing some fans might not like is that his gloves are red. Traditionally in the comic those are purple, but they are red in the cartoon, so this is accurate, and in my opinion it does make them stand out better against the cape. This wide angle does bring us to one of the common criticisms of this figure, mainly the length of his arms. I do agree that they seem a bit long, but putting him in action poses and you'll never notice. My bigger issue is that he's a bit on the short side. Switching back over to the hero version, and this is honestly a costume I never thought about getting in action figure form. He maintains his iconic purple cape, now with a fashionable scarf instead of a collar, but the red has been traded out for a more plum purple with a big lavender M front and center. I like to imagine that in-universe Magneto sat around thinking, what do superheroes look like? Oh yeah, they fly around unmasked and wear big letters on their chests. I'll do that! They have the same basic height and build, but the arms are more proportionate on the hero version. Remember, they use the arms from the 3-pack version, but the 3-pack version is taller. Put arms from a taller body onto a shorter body and, well, they're gonna be too long. I'm not saying it isn't frustrating, I'm just explaining how it happened. The villain version benefits from new sculpting, a more stable cape, and some nice painting effects, while the hero version benefits from a fantastic head sculpt, an equally clean paint job, and better proportions. Like all of Magneto's arguments, there are pros and cons to each side, so for presentation, this round is another draw. Moving on to posability, and despite being the same character, their articulation is actually not the same. That said, and from the top, both heads are on ball joints and disc swivels. Of course, the good Magneto has this really long hair, so don't expect him to be looking up. Old Buckethead doesn't have any trouble in that department though. As for looking down, his scarf kinda gets in the way, and again, no trouble there. Moving on down, to both figures have swivel hinge shoulders, which can raise this high. The villain version is higher, and I almost get the impression he could go even higher still if not for the cape, but good Magneto gets his first boost from butterfly joints. Because of the oversized collar, the villain version does not have that. Both do have bicep swivel though. It also occurs to me that the good version's arms are actually a bit thicker. I guess he decided to beef up a bit before joining the team. They also both have bicep swivel with pretty equivalent bends. Moving to the middle, and Magneto has an ab crunch and a waist swivel. They can arch back this far, with the villain villain version getting a negligibly deeper bend, and they can hunch forward this far, which is pretty equivalent. No tilt, of course, but both can twist. Below the belt, and both figures have ball-jointed hips. Their kicks are equivalent, as are their spreads. Moving down the leg, and both figures have thigh cut, and pinless double-jointed knees with pretty equal bends, but the good version gets another boost thanks to boot cut. Otherwise, both have Marvel Legends ankles that can hinge, and like Magneto trying to be good, pivot. If you had $1 for every time I said equivalent in this category, you could probably buy one of these figures. That said, there are some distinct differences. In a couple of spots, the villain version does have the better range, but additional joints like the butterfly hinge and boot cut gives this version the edge. For posability, this round goes to Hero. Moving on to playability, and this category is interesting. When the villain version of Magneto came out in Wave 1, I was a bit underwhelmed by the piece count. He came with alternate fists, but that was it. I was really hoping for an alternate unhelmeted head or maybe some power effects. At the time, we had no idea that he was going to be donning this look in the show or that this figure was coming. And this Magneto not only has one unhelmeted head, he has two. And those heads fit Series 1 perfectly. In a way, that makes these figures complementary. Inversely, the Hero version of Magneto came preloaded with fists, but he comes with interchangeable open hands. That gave me another idea. Swapping those out for the villain version also. Unfortunately, those darker, more plum-colored gloves really do clash with the purple from the rest of the figure. Otherwise, your best bet are the hands from Age of Apocalypse. But playability is more than just accessories, it's also about how well your figure plays with others. Of course, we've got to start with his friend and rival, Charles Francis Xavier, but for a few other Magnetos in my collection, and here we have the Toy Biz Marvel vs. Capcom 2-pack version, the Hasbro Marvel Legends Family Matters 3-pack version, and the Age of Apocalypse. For the other X-Men 97 figures I've looked at so far, and here we have Wolverine, as well as Cyclops, who I really don't think should be taller than Magneto. Here we have the Dark Phoenix 2-pack Cyclops, and then here we have the Jim Lee retro-carded Storm. I haven't looked at the X-Men 97 version yet, but if you saw episode 2, you'd know that there might not be a point. That said, for the classic look, and here we have the Thunderbird 2-pack version. Next up is Jean Grey, who we'll be revisiting in our next X-Men video, the retro card version of Gambit, the retro card version of Rogue, who we'll also be revisiting before Season 2 is up. You're not the only one revisiting Rogue. Yeah, I got a feeling Magneto's about to find out the hard way why they call this guy the Ragin' Cajun. Some mall baby who I hear eats chili fries, and a beloved character who the comics turned into a genocidal maniac and ruined. That segues very nicely to the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, including Toad, the Walgreens exclusive Mystique, Sting, Pyro, Avalanche, and Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. For some other villains though, and here we have the sinister Mr. Sinister. I'm keeping it in. The comic-style Apocalypse Build-A-Figure, the animated series-influenced retro card Apocalypse, Don't You Know Who I Am? And the living embodiment of Magneto combined with Xavier, Onslaught. For a relative scale comparison, here are Magnetos with Pizza Spidey and the Spectacular Spider-Man, and as always, here they are with Stealth Iron Man. While the villain version is fine on its own as a basic Magneto, it's clearly elevated by the added swappability of the Hero version, making it an almost necessary companion. For playability, this round goes to Hero. This leaves us with nothing left to discuss but the price. As of this recording, both versions are readily available for the retail price of $24.99, and with the Hero version having the higher piece count and therefore being the better value, you might think it's a slam dunk, but we need to dig deeper. Magneto is one of the most significant villains, not just to the X-Men, but comic books in general, and yet there are very few 6-inch scale versions available, and even fewer of them that are affordable. Don't get me wrong, there are other versions of Magneto that are available and affordable, such as the Age of Apocalypse, but not that classic version we know and love. With the Family Matters 3-pack and Mafex version going for over $120, if all you want is a good basic classic 6-inch Magneto, this is your best bet. For price, this round goes to Villain, making this battle a tie. As in the comic and on the show, the struggle between Magneto's heroic and villainous natures continues. How do you like Magneto's arc on the show so far, and do you think he'll stay a hero or revert to his villainous ways? Sound off in the comments and let me know which Magneto costume is your favorite. If you like this video, check out one of these. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back again real soon, but until then, play nice and have fun.